So right now, while VOX is complaining that drug companies are not taking into account the biological differences between men and women, they're proactively pushing the agenda that there are no biological differences between men and women. Question of the day. Do you really believe that we're still living with the remnants, I guess, of patriarchy, and that all consumer goods and medicine have been created for men by default, especially when you consider that women drive the majority of consumer purchasing? This is the argument that now is being pushed forward from VOX, along with this sort of intergender spectrum. I don't fully understand it, but VOX put this video forward, absent, we're not going to talk about their beautiful and brave contributors.
Beautiful? Brave?
They put out a video, I think this morning, on how everything is made exclusively for men, and the deck is stacked against women, particularly when it comes to, and this, by the way, it took me a lot of research because everything, let me set this up, everything they say is wrong, and I want you to fact check me on this. So everything is made exclusively for men, particularly drugs. Roll clip.
This is Reference Man. He's a white 30-year-old male who weighs about 155 pounds.
It's Gerald C.
And he decides how we live. For decades, industries have considered this the standard human and designed the world around him. Everything from air conditioning in offices to cars, even military equipment. But there are other ways we use reference man that aren't so obvious, like in medicine, where it doesn't just lead to discomfort. Here, the disparity can be incredibly dangerous for women.
I love how in trying to shut down the patriarchy, they create effectively what amounts to an infomercial with completely incompetent women.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, how does a seatbelt work? She's put on the military helmet like she's Marvin the Martian. Yeah. I don't know. It must be designed for a larger brain. And by the way, none of these things are true. Quick fact check. Military only designing gear for men? No, it's no longer the case, and our PT requirements are lower because women couldn't do pull-ups. So, good for you. Not good for the countries we liberate, but good for you. Air conditioning, they're talking about air conditioning in the offices. Talk about scraping the bottom of the bitching barrel. Not bitch barrel, the bitching barrel. It's like, what else do we have to complain about? I don't know. Futz around with the thermostat. It's 2 degrees too low. Clearly an example of patriarchy. And you want us to give the world back, the new world back to Native Americans? They would have had you scalped.
Yeah. I always set my AC to patriarchy. It's a nice setting.
It is a nice setting.
I lock it.
You have to go through in the smart settings. I just say, Alexa, set it to patriarchy. She says, how dare you? I say, I dare. And she says, okay. All right. So then they start going on to drugs being created exclusively. Keep in mind, none of this is true, but I want you to watch it for yourself.
A few years ago, something strange was happening. Headline after headline recounted a similar story. Dozens of women were crashing their cars under the influence of sleeping pills. In many of these cases, they had taken a dose of zolpidem the night before. It's what you probably know as the common sleep aid, ambien.
After the crashes, the Food and Drug Administration issued a safety warning in 2013 and changed the recommended dosage for women, cutting it in half. The reason the right dosage for women had been overlooked is that the clinical trials on ambien focused on male test subjects.
Okay, first off, the medical premise that they try to run with in this installment episode. By the way, there are YouTube originals now being co-produced with VOX.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Warm and cuddly. So,
oh boy.
Not true, not accurate, but we'll come back to that. The fact that they use ambien, that's the red herring. It's unbelievable to me that they chose it, because obviously they would have picked the best example to put their foot forward.
Of
right?
course,
Typically, if you're going to go through millions of dollars in production budgets and all the cool transitions and little graphics that are entirely unnecessary.
The xylophone. Don't forget the xylophone.
You would pick the strongest example. Let's go through. They list a bunch of examples there as far as how it relates to ambien and women, and that women were not processing ambien properly because the dosing protocol didn't account for them. And they use a bunch of stories. So we'll take some screens there still. So here's one right there. That first story, okay. The VOX lady, it's Carrie Kennedy, by the way, daughter of Robert Kennedy.
Okay. Right.
Now, here's something that we need to be clear about. She didn't claim that she was still groggy from taking Ambien the day before, but she accidentally took Ambien instead of her thyroid meds the next morning before going to the gym. So not exactly indicative of Big Pharma trying to screw those with ovaries. Second story, okay? I think a college student who took, they list it there. So I had to go through these stories. At first I was just planning on debunking the general idea that the medical establishment is against women, and we'll get to that in a second. But it is...
We found more.
VOX, you are a marvel that you picked these stories. Let's rattle on through them. The second story, college student who they claim to stole his woman crash car. No, she didn't take one, but she took, quote, 2 or 3 ambien at midnight and then decided to go get a drink at 2 a.m., at which point she was pulled over.
I can't even remember how many she took.
The other 2 stories, one was a woman who drove off the road at 2 a.m. after taking ambien. Again, not the next morning, 2 a.m., which is
2
when, if you're taking a sleeping pill, one would think that 2 a.m. you should be sleeping.
Not driving.
And then the other one didn't exactly crash, as the headline suggests, or the one that they run. She fell asleep at a McDonald's drive-thru. Again, at midnight, drove up on the curb. So ambien at midnight. And I'm not sure that we can blame the FDA for this, by the way, the dosage, when people take a handful of Ambien, like it's an M&M's commercial, before going for an evening drive. Not even a stroll, mind you.
No. And
they all got behind a four-wheeler.
Yeah, the problem is she went to McDonald's at midnight. That's more concerning to me.
I don't think that's concerning at all, and I resent the statement.
It is. Taco Bell's the only worse option.
And the funny thing is, this is one of those, a lot of people since then have blamed traffic accidents on Ambien.
Yeah.
And they weren't all women. So here's another high-profile case, by the way. Another Kennedy, Representative Patrick Kennedy, son of Ted Kennedy.
That's a lot of bad luck.
I think you know where this is going. Since then, by the way, people they've often used this excuse, well, I took an Ambien to try and defend the litany of actions.
Yeah.
And it's become sort of this legal quandary. Like, I don't know what you want to do, Your Honor. A serial murder? He took Ambien.
By the way, she said dozens of women. There's like millions of people taking Ambien. Dozens compared to millions?
The real moral to the story here is friends don't let friends drive with Kennedys. Ambien or not.
Much more dangerous.
You combine the Kennedys and driving, you add a benzodiazepine to the mix, you've got some problems.
Exactly.
Consider yourself lucky if you made it out, above water.
Oh, that's true.
Now here's the thing, though. It is true that the dosage was too high across the board. So I want to be clear about this here. Studies were conducted afterwards that sort of studied the link between Ambien and traffic accidents, and they found that the morning after taking the originally recommended dose, 33% of women had dangerous blood levels of the drug. That sounds bad. But 25% of men did.
Come on.
That's not far off.
The difference between a quarter and a third.
Yeah,
so the FDA ended up recommending lower dosages for both men and women, with doctors being encouraged to prescribe a half dose regardless of sex or gender. The two are the same. Beautiful and brave. So I want to be really clear about this. These are the examples that they chose.
Crazy.
And does the isolated case of Ambien, assuming that they were being honest, does that really prove anything about the sort of wider world of drug development? By the way, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed, because subscriptions don't mean a whole lot. You'll be notified. New videos every single day at 8 p.m. Eastern, and of course, join Mug Club, loudouscutter.com/Mug Club, because we are not funded by big drug companies who exclude women from their clinical trial parameters. So let's go to the next clip from Vox.
There are several factors that can affect how a person metabolizes drugs, from size to body fat to hormonal fluctuations. And these factors can vary drastically based on sex. But many clinical trials don't account for this. They often don't include enough women as test subjects. And even when they do, data from women is often mixed in with data from men, which can hide sex-specific reactions to medicine.
By the way, after that, all those little clay balls turn into one giant ball, and he says, I'm going to be a dentist. So this is something they talk about sex. So this is where they really want to be clear about sex. So hold on a second. Do you mean to tell me that men and women are biologically different?
What?
What about, and we're very clear from YouTube, you are not allowed to refer to even the DSM-5 or the idea of gender identity don't finish the word. So let's just, what about gender? What about the dysphorians? Is that okay? What about the dysphorians? What happens there if someone identifies as a female but is biologically male? How do we handle that? We'll come back to that in a second here. The problem is that Vox assumes these results only go one way.
Right.
That it's always good for men, it's always bad for women. That's not true. Some drugs are more effective for women.
Yeah.
Some drugs are more effective in men. This is something that's important for people to understand, because it's very easy to cherry pick for the same reason it's easy to say or make it seem as though the United States is responsible for all the evil in the world if you don't account for the fact that slavery still goes on elsewhere that is not the United States.
Right, exactly.
Same thing here. It's like, well, you can just take into account that, some drugs aren't processed very well by women, but the same goes from it. By the way, same goes across races.
Yeah.
You've heard of Asian rosacea? That's an actual thing.
Yeah.
It's a genetic profile where they don't process alcohol the same way. Is this considered racist? Because I am excluding someone of a specific half Asian lawyer, Bill Richmond, if he were here, he would tell you. He gets very flushed. I just assumed that he was jolly.
Nice.
Turns out it's a problem.
It really is a problem.
We should be keeping an eye on him.
Yes.
Let's go to the next clip.
In 1993, the National Institutes of Health created regulations saying women must be included in human studies and have their data analyzed separately. But the problem is,
it's the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, that's making the decisions about what medications are being sold to you and to your loved ones, and they are not required to include women, people of color, people over 65. If you're
because
only
you'd never
studying
test that.
white men,
The
you don't have to study
POCs.
as many people. The more people you study, the more it costs to do the research.
Oh my
But
gosh.
the more meaningful the information is, so that we can all make informed decisions about what's good for us.
Yes, because you need to understand that evil Big Pharma, it's all a part of their ploy to eliminate precisely 50% of the marketplace
Exactly.
when studying their drugs. There's no financial incentive to find out how drugs interact with women because
Yes, but it's also people of color, Stephen. So
Yeah.
that eliminates even
That's
more.
even
yes,
more.
we will eliminate them. So we
crazy.
want to eliminate 64% because I'm pretty sure that everyone at the FDA is a white supremacist
Right,
who wants
yes.
the Kennedys to be rolling up on curbs at McDonald's in the middle of the night on Ambien because we all had a double secret patriarchy meeting behind their backs.
Yes, we did.
Here's something that's mind-numbing to me, too. And I didn't plan on going through all this history today. VOX left it out.
They had to do it.
They mentioned that before
does it to
1993,
you.
women were not included in these studies.
How dare they?
That's true.
Yes.
That's true. Could the why matter? Why, Vox, do you not tell people that before the 1970s, women were included?
Oh.
And why?
seems relevant.
It seems like it would be relevant.
Yes.
Just like the fact that 25% of men versus 33% of women, you
Yes.
think it's
Right.
relevant.
That's an
that means
8%
too many
difference.
people are taking too much of the drug. We want to save lives, not just women's lives, but men's lives too.
Yeah.
We don't want more Kennedys in the bottom of
We want
ravines.
fewer Kennedys.
I'm not necessarily sure. I think ravine means that
Period.
it's between a.
I don't know. Yeah, that's
is
like
it a
cliffs.
valley?
There's
It's like
cliffs
cliffs.
or something.
quandary.
It's like-
Let's just go with river. That way I don't have to be fact checked. So before the 1970s, women were included. They were eliminated. Why? Because there was these disastrous. This drug was thalidomide.
Thalidomide, yeah.
I've only read it because I've never taken
My
it.
wife could pronounce it. I can't.
But there was a scandal in the 1960s, and the drug caused terrible birth defects, right?
Yes.
Especially when it was given to pregnant women. So after 1977, the FDA issued a guideline that women of childbearing age should not be included in the studies.
That seems protective.
Seems as though, well, the double secret patriarchy, this is how they hook you in. They hook you in by protecting you,
it's double negative.
and then they give you too much Lunesta. It's like, we're going to make sure that you have children, and then
Okay.
you're going to be seeing butterflies all over the place, which, by the way, is a very creepy commercial.
Butterflies are
If I
cool.
take that, I too can have a bad acid trip.
Exactly. Sign me up.
So then in 1993, there were guidelines that VOX, they mentioned. It was merely a reversal of the 1977 ban, and then they were written into law. Studies have shown, by the way, that since then, women, members of all races, have been included in studies.
Yes.
This comes from Women's Health, this overlay. Again, so it's not just from the double secret patriarchy meeting. Scientists have conducted since then very specific reviews to see if the 1977 ban had any effect on women participating in these studies. They found zero evidence that their participation was any lower.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So here's something else, by the way. A lot of studies don't separate results for the sexes in
Right.
trying to do research for this. This is a problem. A lot of studies, they don't actually tell you who was included in the study. So often it'll include many different, men, women, people of different races.
Right.
The final results aren't necessarily divided up among those groups, okay? It's not that they started out with this hypothetical 155-pound, 30-year-old white male mannequin, as Vox suggests, which, by the way,
his mouth open.
if that male weighs 155 pounds with no arms or legs, he's very dense.
Ooh,
Yeah.
very dense. I
It's like
didn't
a
think about
midget.
that.
Like apparently Vern Troyer weighed like 200 pounds.
Wow.
That's like a cannonball.
Yikes.
Oh, how do you move that?
It's unsettling. Anyway, the point is they've lumped.
Don't dwell on it.
It's the opposite of the problem that Vox tries to present here, and this is important because it's a divide and conquer, where they want you to go, oh, hold on a second, men are getting something that women are not getting here.
Right.
See, we need to right this wrong when there is no wrong to right, and there are plenty of other actual wrongs in the world that we can right. This is not amongst them. So it's the opposite of the problem they presented. They've lumped, a lot of these studies lump both sexes together just to create an average. And think about that for a second. It's an average. It's a genderless, non-binary, hypothetical person.
Yeah. Right.
That should be
Yeah.
something that we can all be on
their
board with.
goal,
Of course.
isn't
And why do you think that is? Here's something else, too. It could also be, the reason they don't want to separate that is because media, academics, the entertainment industry, they've all been telling us that there are no biological differences between men and women. They've been telling us that there aren't any significant differences between male and female brains, that it's a myth that men are stronger than women. We even have the American Psychological Association claiming that there's no big difference between men and women. Here you go. Here's a collage for you, sweetheart. Remember when James Damore at Google, YouTube, he got in trouble for circulating an internal memo saying that, hey, there are biological differences between men and women that may affect their choices?
That poor scarecrow.
The left loses their mind when you suggest that there are any biological differences between the sexes. Let's go to another point here. Let's not forget that there are some drugs that are researched specifically for members of specific sexes. For example, you have libido drugs. There's a recent drug to treat low female libido was studied on females only. Seems like that would be appropriate. Male pattern baldness drugs focuses on primarily men.
Sexist.
Doesn't mean that women, I mean, there are drugs exclusively in there. They try to talk about it being ageist. There are drugs for old people. There are drugs for genetic diseases that exist only, for example, black people, sickle cell. There are diseases that exist exclusively in Jewish bloodlines. The same thing with French, Canadian, and Acadian bloodlines. I find out through genetic testing that there are like 12 diseases as a French Canadian that only I can have. This is what's really concerning to me because the media, the entertainment industry, they've been trying to say there are no difference between men and women for a long time, right? But now you have psychiatric associations trying to come out and, appease the politically correct God, saying, well, there really is no significant primary difference. You have people who are coming out talking about athletics because women's track records are being set by male to female transgender dysphorians. I want to use the right terminology.
Right. Yeah.
Same thing with powerlifting, same thing with Olympic lifting, same thing with combat sports. Yeah. So when you get to a point where you say that it used to be men and women some men wanted to take dumps in the bathroom where women went, and they identified as women. We said, well, okay,
they're nicer
that's fine,
bathrooms.
that's
I get it.
And we were saying this could be a slippery slope. And people said, why would you use that argument? It's a logical fallacy. I think if nothing else, this last decade has proven to us that slippery slope is not a logical fallacy because now we have men doing this in prize fighting with women.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know how much further there is to slip down a slope, but when you think about this and you're talking about medical testing, what do you do? What do you do when a woman identifies as a man, trans, female to male, says, and it says on their identification, I am a male, and you're doing some kind of, a Viagra clinical trial? Well, what if you're doing something for birth control for women? Because we've even read at Huffington Post, and we've seen it, men can get periods too, and I'm not exactly sure which way it even goes, if they mean female. No one's clear on the rule book. The only thing that we're clear on is that the rule book has to be thrown out if somebody is offended. So this is now seeping into science. It's seeping into the medical community where you are going to have studies, or at least you should have studies that absolutely should study exclusively biological women because the medicine is only relevant to biological women. Keep this in mind. You think this is absurd? When I went to Planned Parenthood, I said I might be pregnant. They gave me Plan B. And did a pregnancy test.
Looked like a man.
And we stole the urine from a pregnant woman. And instead of asking me, did you steal this urine from a pregnant woman? They said, congratulations.
Yes, sir, this is biologically impossible.
Let me write your certificate in case you want to take care of it with an abortion. At Planned Parenthood, they couldn't tell me that the fact is the elevated levels of those hormones indicate testicular cancer in a man because they're not allowed to dead name you. So right now, while VOX is complaining that drug companies are not taking into account the biological differences between men and women, they're proactively pushing the agenda that there are no biological differences between men and women. Well, who do you think that's going to help?
How do we do
Do you
this?
think that women are going to have more success with the drugs that are coming out of these trials or less? Especially when you understand that many of these participants are cloaked. Right now, it's hard to find out who's participating. If you read about 50% men and 50% women in a study and you find out that 50% of those women were actually biological men who still have penises, but they wanted to use the Nuva ring. First off, I'm not even sure how it works, but this is the problem with the divide and conquer modern progressive left, where there is no through line, there's no trail of breadcrumbs back where you can say, all right, listen, we understand people want to identify a certain way, but biologically there clearly are differences, and we have to respect that, particularly in the realm of science and medicine.
Yes.
No, they can't say that, and then they'll want to complain about the fact that some drug companies miss testing for biological differences. I want to know what you think. If you think that this is a byproduct of patriarchy, or if you just think it's another crappy video in a long line of crappy videos from VOX. VOX. Hey there, YouTube viewer. If you like this video, click one of these other videos playing in a box up there and hit subscribe or the notification bell if you're already subscribed so you can find out about our new non-controversial videos, which don't ruffle any feathers and, of course, are not a violation of YouTube's algorithms. Everyone's welcome here. except I don't know if we are. But it's our channel. I'm not sure how that works.